30, 40 years ago, HIV was positioned as a death sentence and was reported as the gay plague. Guess what? We'll hold it in a country that's not inclusive, that's open about the fact that it's illegal to be gay in these countries, that has got terrible human rights against migrant workers building the stadiums to host these really inclusive games. You know, I feel it's a total contradiction, and then I wonder what the legacy of it's going to be.
You're working on a campaign called Tackle HIV. We're here on a bus with that as the, emblazoned with that as the slogan.
Yeah.
Why is there still a stigma surrounding HIV?
There's a stigma surrounding HIV because there's still a huge amount of misinformed and uneducated people. Now, I'm not saying they're uneducated, which means they're dumb. What I'm saying, they're uneducated because there's a system, whether that be in school, there's a society, whether that be in a pub, whether that be in a restaurant, where people don't talk about it. You know, so the advancements that's been made in science and medicine mean that people living with HIV, such as myself, take medication. I take 1 tablet a day. That modern medicine suppresses the virus in my body, which means that the virus in my body is undetectable, which means that I cannot transmit HIV through sexual contact. Now, the language used, whether it be in the media, whether it be on the streets, the perception by people tell you something completely different to the fact. You know, so it's really important that the misinformation that creates the stigma in society is put right, because there's no need for it to be stigma. But people are stigmatized against, people who are living with HIV, which then also stigmatizes people from getting tested for HIV. And to understand that there's a stigma also then around the characteristic of a person who lives with HIV, because everybody assumes that somebody who's in danger, for instance, or is going to be living with HIV is someone who's gay and bisexual, a male, gay or bisexual, or a black African man and woman. And the reality is, number crunching, is that in 2020 in England, there was more new cases of HIV amongst heterosexual people than they were amongst gay and bisexual men. And that was the first time in a decade. So the truth is, anyone can get a virus. New cases of HIV continue. So it's really, it's really important for us to portray the message of the importance of testing and the understanding that HIV is a virus that is and does and can infect anyone, regardless of your characteristic, regardless of your gender, regardless of your privilege or your non-privilege.
Yeah, interesting point you made there about more heterosexual people contracting HIV. The vast majority of people that follow Joe's platforms will be straight white men.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, HIV/AIDS is still seen as a problem with the LGBT community rather than something that can affect heterosexual people. How do we combat that?
Is to re-educate people, right? So the fact is, say middle-aged white men, right? And this is why I think these actually are the best platforms for us to talk on, because it's an audience that probably wouldn't listen to this or would be uncomfortable listening to this because it's uncomfortable listening from, right?
It would probably only be on LGBT media platforms.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
Probably why.
And the thing is, it's really easy, right, for us to say, the only media I want to do is the media that's spread out to the people who already understand. Therefore, my ego's great because everyone thinks what I'm doing is brilliant because they already get it, they're already on board. But campaigning is about talking to uncomfortable audiences to make them feel comfortable about it. And the reality is, let's take middle-aged white men, right? Heterosexual is probably 30, 40 years ago, HIV was positioned as a death sentence and was reported as the gay plague. Now those myths and misunderstandings continue to exist, and levels of awareness of what it is to live with HIV remain way too low because people feel that, I'm not as a characteristic because I already know enough about HIV to know that if I'm straight, if I'm heterosexual, it's not going to affect me. But what is the difficult thing about what we're doing and the uncomfortable thing for people is what we're trying to say to people is what you feel you knew, you have to unthink that. And you have to let me or let us as a campaign, or as other people who do a lot of campaign in this space, you have to let us re-educate you. It may be uncomfortable for you to hear this, and it may be scary for you to hear this, but you need to. Like, I'm not campaigning on behalf of the LGBT community. Like, the LGBT community is disproportionately affected, right? You can't deny that. But it's not solely affected by HIV. So why we campaign is not to make my life better or people of the LGBTQ lives better. Yeah, it's part of that. But to make everybody aware that you may think it's, 10, 15 degrees of separation away from you, but the reality is that, this could affect you. It could affect your husband, your wife, your daughter, your brother, your sister. It could affect anyone, regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality, regardless of race. This is a virus that can and does affect and infect anyone. Like in the UK, out of everyone living in the UK who is affected or living with HIV, a third of those people are female. Globally, out of everyone who's living with everyone who's living with HIV globally, 54% of them are female. So those numbers in itself kind of bust the myth that, I don't need to hear this. This is not going to enter, my house. Don't put it on my doorstep because I'm not affected by it. The reality is the potential is you are. And all we are trying to say to people is that if you have nothing to fear, then you should know your status. You should get a test and find out your status. What's to fear if you have nothing to fear?
Is HIV as dangerous as people think?
HIV is a manageable virus. But HIV is only a manageable virus if it's detected, if you know you have HIV. So if people are afraid of being tested for HIV because they're afraid of the consequence, because again, through reporting, through conversations, people just assume, and it's really easy to just assume that HIV is a death sentence. But if you get tested positive for HIV, you go on medication straight away. Modern medicine prevents the virus in your body becoming detectable. So you become undetectable, which means that you cannot then transmit the virus through sexual contact to anyone. So HIV is just like any other virus when it comes to, if it's a virus you have and you don't know you've got it, and you're not taking medicine to prevent that virus doing more harm to your body, then yes, it can be dangerous. So I'm not sitting here and saying it can't be dangerous, but it can be preventable. It's so preventable from being dangerous. It's so preventable from progressing into AIDS. And it's a really important fact for everyone who's listening to understand that HIV and AIDS are two different things. AIDS is untreated HIV. So if you get diagnosed with HIV, it remains as HIV, but it remains as an undetectable HIV in your body when you start taking medication, which means, like I do, I can be a HIV positive person, I have a HIV negative husband, and I live a very normal, very happy, very healthy life. And my life expectancy as a HIV positive person, but as somebody who knows they're HIV positive, therefore takes medication, my life expectancy is exactly the same as somebody who is HIV negative. No different. Doesn't stop me doing the same things as somebody who's HIV negative. Doesn't stop me physically doing the same things. Doesn't stop me mentally doing the same things. I live a normal, happy, healthy life just like anyone else. But almost safe in the knowledge that I know my status. I'm not afraid in the knowledge that I know my status.
I was going to say, because you've managed to complete triathlons You don't take this wrong.
Got to stop you there. It was an Ironman.
Ironman.
Very different thing. Trust me, if you did one or the other, you'd know that they're very fucking different things.
All right. For the ignorant people like me, then what's the difference between
so triathlons are different distances.
Right.
So an Ironman is a 2-point something swim in the sea, over 2 miles in the sea. Whatever the point is after, it doesn't matter. It's like over 2 miles. Then you get on a bike and you do a 112-mile cycle, and I did the one in Wales, which I Ironman Tenby.
Yeah.
And as you well know, being a Welshman, Wales is famous for many things. Being flat isn't one of them. So it's a very hilly course. And then if things can't get any worse, once you get off the 112-mile bike ride, you run a marathon just for a laugh. So triathlons are different distances. Like you could do a sprint triathlon, which can take like, you know, an hour and a half, or you can do a full Ironman, which took me like 12 hours. Takes some people 18 hours. I think I did it 3 years ago, and I think there's some people still doing it right now. They still haven't finished. It takes them that long.
But all jokes aside, the fact you've been able to complete these events after, you know, contracting HIV, taking medication for it, and don't take this the wrong way, but it's many years since you retired from rugby.
Yeah.
A lot of old rugby boys let themselves go. You certainly haven't. So the fact you've been able to maintain that athleticism as well, do you feel like there's part of you that does these events to show people that look, everything's achievable?
Absolutely. I do it to show anything's achievable, but also to show that HIV is not a limit to what I'm capable of achieving, physically or mentally. And I learned within rugby that there's kind of two ways of teaching me. And therefore I feel sometimes it's easier for me to use the ways I learned to try and teach other people. Now, one was give people verbal information, you know, and sometimes when I was given this verbal information, I'd be sitting there and like some would go in, some would go out. But when somebody physically showed me something, it's kind of impossible to deny. It's impossible to disprove that theory. So I wanted to not just verbally give people information, but I wanted to physically stand up and show people what people living with HIV are capable of. And that is that I was and I am capable of doing anything better, worse, but the exact same thing as somebody who's not living with HIV. And that was the physical example that I wanted to show to people, that is not limiting me, neither does it limit anyone else who is living with HIV. And that I was motivated then, I suppose, for every second of the rest of my life to kind of be that physical proof. So, you know, every time I go to the gym, for me, it's disproving a theory that maybe somebody who sees me walk in the gym would be like, oh, I know this guy's got HIV. Oh, wow, but fair play, he can move on the machine. He can lift weights. Okay, maybe what he's telling me is true. I'm seeing it with my own eyes. I believe it. So it's not just them big events. It's, for me, it's an everyday occurrence that I feel I'm really proud to represent the magnificent gains that science and medicine has made to allow me to be in this position that I am today.
How do you convince other people that that's the way they should approach HIV? Because on a less serious note, you've suffered, you know, some fairly nasty abuse since you revealed your status, and obviously you were sort of blackmailed into revealing it in the first place. So can you tell us about some of the abuse you suffered, and how do we overcome those sorts of views?
Yeah, like, you know, online has given people very much almost kind of like an open invitation to be discriminative, because, you know, even though you realize, you know, it's cheap, like it's kind of pathetic, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt any less. But you know, what I find is whenever I kind of bring this campaign up, when I bring it to the attention of people, you know, usually people are sitting at home or, you know, out in their workplace, they're kind of like, yeah, but you know, that I get it. I don't need to know about it. I don't want it on my front doorstep. I don't want it in my newspaper. I don't want it on my telly. And you find that when all of a sudden you kind of infiltrate then they feel then that that's the time for them to come back and their discrimination rises to the fore. But what I always find with that is when people, a lot of people, that's why I think it's really relevant people understand the difference between HIV and AIDS, because a lot of people, call me a leper or, tell me to F off because you got AIDS. And it's kind of like, I find there's a sense of, okay, well, I'll call that out. I won't allow you to just say it and get away with it. Because if you just say it and get away with it, it means that you think then all of a sudden it becomes okay to say it. Therefore you'll say it again, but maybe to someone else. So I just use it as a form of sense of education, because a lot of people as well, and I have empathy with a lot of people, because if people like genuinely discriminate against me, or maybe don't want to shake my hand because they're fearful of contracting the virus, or don't want to share the same glass as me or the same toilet seat, they're only doing it because they want to keep themselves safe, because they genuinely believe that if they share the same glass or shake my hand or give me a hug, they're going to contract it. And when I see that and I correct people by that, then I feel like, in a way I'm kind of glad in a way that you showed me the discrimination, because then I used that opportunity to correct the fact that you weren't discriminative. It's when it's the more horrible discrimination, when it's the more nasty verbal discrimination, it's quite easy to defend yourself, because a lot of that discrimination is coming from uneducated people, coming from people that are saying stupid things that are really easy to correct. And I find what that gives as well is then gives other people the strength and the motivation who are also being discriminated or blackmailed against, or it being used against them. I find it gives them strength to feel like, well, okay, standing up to discrimination is the way to stamp out discrimination. Educating people is the way to stop discrimination happening in the first place. So you find you get to give other people the strength to campaign in their own little ways as well.
Why do you continue to give so much to media and put so much of your time away from media, when it's been the media that have been essentially a huge part in your biggest struggles, really, in blackmail and things like that? So why do you continue to give media time? Because
I don't tar everyone with the same brush. I don't look at the media and see them for the worst things that's happened to me. It's like I don't look at my campaign and purely concentrate on the people who are discriminative to me. I think we can all pinpoint the small little negatives and decide to kind of let that rot your opinion of it. But I think and I believe the media, the education of media, the work media does, mate, it's fucking so powerful. It's so important. So I could choose to run a campaign and say, do you know what, how dare you, what you've done to me, I'm justified, and I can be justified to say I don't want to speak to you anymore. But I do not think that everyone in the media is out for a salacious gossip, pointless story. I believe there's people, and a lot more people in the media, that want to listen to people who want to do something to change the world to be a better place.
Yeah.
And without the media, I wouldn't have a voice. So I get it. Like, I totally get it. And I'd sit down with a lot of the media that's been negative and bad to me. I'd sit down with them. I haven't got time to walk around choosing to hate everybody. I haven't got the energy to do that. I'm
too busy training for an Ironman.
Yeah, too busy training. Yeah, too busy getting over an Ironman. Too busy getting over it. But I am, mate. I think within this space you have to have a sense of empathy. I have a total sense of understanding. I have a sense of compassion. A lot of people around me, a lot of my family questioning and like, why do you have that? But I have it because it makes my life better. Makes me a happy person.
A lot of the abuse that you've suffered, I got here, like being spat in the street, called AIDS spreader, told you should be locked up. A lot of that is sort of intensified in the last sort of few months. I know there's an ongoing court case that you probably aren't allowed to talk about. But do you think that's actually ramped up the amount of abuse that you've suffered?
I feel what it's done is it's kind of maybe given a green light for use of stigmatized language and use and sometimes use of like incorrect information. Like I said, I think sometimes when something comes up that people say they're okay about, but when something comes up for them to justify a form of discrimination, boy, do they then raise their heads. And what then I think is good about that is because I'd rather, when it comes to discrimination, I'd rather see like, you know, like the wolf at your door. I'd rather see this wolf like with dripping blood from his teeth, knowing that this is a dangerous beast, rather than the sly little fox who's just as dangerous as the wolf, but he'll give you a grin, and the minute you turn your back, he's going to absolutely stab you. So I think what happens with things like that is it magnifies the wolf. I get to see the wolf, so I get to understand it, you know, and I get to see, oh my gosh, the fox has been really close to me, and I've never had the opportunity to see the fox, but now I see the fox has turned into a wolf. So I get it, I know, I understand. So everything that happens, every form of discrimination, every form of reasoning for discrimination allows me to see people, to see individuals, to see collectives, to see organizations, allows me to see them in the reality of who they are rather than how they want it to be to perceive to me.
I think people have just been waiting for news like, obviously that's spoken the last few weeks about people have been waiting for things like to try and hit you.
Oh my God, yes. Absolutely, like absolutely, and also to define me by, you know, and that's why I keep going in a straight line. Like that's why I keep going in a straight line, because we've just spoken about so many really, what I'd like to think, really good, positive things that I've done, right? And I want to keep going in that direction. But the wolf just wants, you know, the wolf wants to eat me alive. Like the wolf is dripping blood from his teeth. So he's waiting for a reason to have a go at me. And there's a lot of wolves out there, because there's a lot of people out there who, you know, they're not happy about the fact that I'm trying to re-educate people. You know, it makes them uncomfortable. It's easy, like it's real easy. We can all just get on with life in the way that we want to see it. And sometimes I'm guilty, like of seeing the world in the way I want to see it, rather than the way it is. But also I take real great passion in changing the world to be better for other people who are living with HIV, who see this real world which is horrible for them, which is, you know, which is not nice, which is full of wolves. I want to, you know, I'm really passionate about going in that straight line and creating that world to be better for them. And to do that, I have to face. I can't just face great people who want to come here and, you know, talk positively about it. I can't. That's not the reality of the world that we live in.
You're forcing people to examine their own faults and their own prejudices and things they've done incorrectly. And I guess that's where the uncomfortableness comes from. In that it seems to me when you've messed up, you hold your hands up and be like, okay, you encounter that, as opposed to not pretending that everyone's perfect.
Yeah, mate, I'm not. Yeah. And it's the thing, people, you know, you know, and I don't know how people can perceive me in whatever way they want to perceive me. You know, it's interesting because I've done quite a lot of diverse things, like since my rugby playing career. You know, people know me as someone who played rugby. People know me as someone who was maybe divisive when they played rugby. People know me as someone who done an Ironman. People know me as someone who got HIV. People even know me as someone who did frigging dancing on ice. You know, certain people have certain recollections of who
Eddie
you are.
Butler's probably got a certain
opinion. You know, people have your encounters or your experiences or the memories that people have of you are so varied when you do such a varied thing, right? And so many different varied things, which I love about my life. But I can guarantee you now, never once in my life have I put my hand up and said, listen to me, because guess what? I'm perfect and I know everything. Mate, you got him, I got him downstairs in this office. Mate, if we were perfect, life would be so boring. Life would be so shit. I learn from not having a perfect life. And people say to me sometimes, what's it like being a role model? And I'm like, if I am a role model, which one I don't count myself as a role model, it's because, you know what, I put my hand up to my imperfections. I put my hand up to what I've done wrong, and I admit it. And that is what a role model is. A role model isn't someone who says, listen to me all the time because everything I say is right. That's preaching. I'm not a preacher. Everything I say is right, and you must do everything I say because that makes everything great for everyone. It's like, no. It's not. That's not being a role model. Being real is a role model.
Can you tell us about the role of rugby and how your former teammates or the wider rugby community have dealt with you since revealing your HIV status and since you've began promoting the need of greater awareness?
Yeah, brilliantly supportive, right? And I'll say this may sound like a bit of a contradiction, right? But this is the reality of it. Do you know why they're brilliantly supportive, right? Because if you just want to reveal my sexuality, just like revealing my HIV status, I never wanted to be treated different because of them two things, right? So people didn't make me feel any better about it. They didn't celebrate me. And you know what? They didn't slag me off, but they didn't discriminate me. What they did was actually what I wanted more than anything in the world. And that was they treated me just like they always had. You know, they didn't make any difference. They didn't make too much of a show about it. If I needed support, they were there. And that is, I think, ultimately what sometimes people lose in campaigning is to realize, you know, even with this campaign, I'm not campaigning because I want people living with HIV to be celebrated. I'm not campaigning because, well, I am campaigning to stop people being discriminated. I am campaigning more than anything for people who are living with HIV to be treated with equality, to be treated just the same as anyone else. And I think people sometimes get that mixed up with, because you have this platform, because you give us this time, that we are saying we are more important than you. We are a characteristic that deserves your celebration. We're saying we're a characteristic that doesn't deserve discrimination, but deserves being treated equally. And that was a real powerful message that I learned from my teammates within rugby when I played and when I spoke about my sexuality, and then when I revealed my HIV diagnosis.
How does it make you feel seeing the biggest football event on the planet, the World Cup, going to Qatar, where a country that, you know, punishes homosexuality?
Shocking, I think. I remember even when it was announced, right? And you could feel like there was this sense of corruption even around the announcement of it. And straight away it was tainted. Like straight away the announcement of one of the biggest, if not the biggest sporting event in the global calendar is straight away tainted. You'd think, who made the decision to put this pinnacle event in a country where even before a ball is kicked, there's controversy? Being in Russia was bad enough. You know, it's not illegal in Russia, but it's very much frowned upon. And you think, then you go from Russia, you don't learn them lessons, or with great power has come great corruption. And it doesn't really matter where they hold it, because it was who could afford, you know, to line the pockets of the people who made the decisions was the real choice. So it makes me sad, and it makes all the work being done in football, all the work even being done in sport, it makes it a contradiction. You know, I spend, so many organisations spend years and years, you know, whether it be Stonewall, the Rainbow Laces campaign, Kick It Out, Football Against Homophobia, you spend all these years making this beautiful game a more diverse, a more inclusive game, a game where players, fans, coaches are told that they can be authentic. Yet the total contradiction comes when on the pinnacle of this event that the pinnacle of this sporting event that everyone's working so hard to make inclusive, guess what? We'll hold it in a country that's not inclusive, that's open about the fact that it's illegal to be gay in these countries, that has got terrible human rights against migrant workers building the stadiums to host these really inclusive games. You know, I feel it's a total contradiction, and then I wonder what the legacy of it's going to be. You know, every great sporting event to me, Rugby World Cup, Olympics, Football World Cup, European champion events, all them kind of things, they're all held as a sporting event, but also kind of have a duty of a legacy. And you look at it and you think, what the hell is the legacy of this even about? Like, have they even the people who are organising the event in Qatar said, this will be our legacy. This is what we aim to achieve in this World Cup. A sporting event to me is not purely a success just if it's had full stadiums and good games. It's what happens to the country and the people of that country when that sporting event leaves. And I can't see or have heard of any want or any passion to change pretty much, the terrible human rights that there are when the World Cup has gone. So to me, I genuinely do not see the point in having it. We've got 2 great football stadiums in Wales. We could hold it in Wales. Why not?
Cardiff City Stadium and Principality.
Yeah.
You left the Swansea.com.
No, I didn't leave it out. I said 2 great stadiums. I didn't leave it out. You
said 2.
2 great stadiums, and then you got Swansea down the road. If we need to hold a couple of games, we could do it in Swansea down the road.
All right, I'll let you off for that one. One final thing, obviously you're here to promote people getting HIV tests as well. Yeah. Where can they get HIV tests and how easy is it to get one? So
it's really easy to get a HIV test. On the bus, actually, the upstairs of the double decker, we're doing HIV tests, but you can go online. Terence Higgins Trust is a great place to go online to find testing. Testing is free. It's really easy. You could do it at home. You don't have to go to a sexual health clinic at home to do it. You can do a blood test, or you can do the test we've got up here, just a simple swab test. And if through anything the last couple of years, I think what COVID has taught us all is that kind of testing for a virus is almost kind of a bit of a normal thing now. The stigma to that barrier of doing a test is kind of no longer there because we're all used to doing testing. So there's lots of different ways of testing and lots of ways you can test in an environment and at a time which is comfortable and convenient for you.
Gareth, thanks very much for your time today, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for being so honest and open with us as well.
God bless. Thank you,
really
bud.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Cheers. Gareth.